Cool. All right. So we'll get started. Welcome, Cillian, as our last keynote of the day. Now that everybody's a little brain mush. So I'm going to let you, let you introduce yourself because you'll do it better than I am. You know yourself better than I do. So, and then take it away with food supply chain and blockchain. Yes, got it right.
Sure. So thanks, Caitlin. So hi, everybody. My name is Cillian Leonovich. I'm a director in EY in Ireland. I sit in our technology consulting practice. I'm the local lead for blockchain at EY, and I feed into our global practice and capability that we have developed around that.
Hi.
Just muted Kevin there. Sorry about that. And I suppose I've done a huge amount of work in my career. One in blockchain, because I've been working in the space now for about 5 years with my previous companies. And more broadly in the food space. I have written papers. I have been involved in proof of concepts right through to pilots. And through that work, I guess I'm hoping to get a bit of a flavor today of not just the food supply chain and blockchain, but actually more the practicalities of what's required. Because the reality is that the blockchain technologies we know is not simple, but it's probably the most known part of this equation in terms of it's a fixed solution. Changing behaviors and changing consumers' mindsets isn't as easy as implementing a technology in many instances. So what I'm planning to do is just walk through some of the capability and some of the thoughts that I've had in this area, and also how I got thinking about this area in the first place before I wrote a white paper about it, and all those different things. I'll turn off my camera because I know when I share screens, sometimes it doesn't always work with my camera, but because I'm literally tethering off a phone here in County Kildare. But if I just stop my video and I'll has any questions throughout. Caitlin, I probably won't be looking at the questions, so if you do just want to shout out anything, I'm happy to stop. And, for people to ask questions throughout the presentation, it's no issue at all, okay? So please just interject, okay? So with that in mind, hopefully everybody can see the slides. So really today is about the food supply chain and blockchain, and where my interest got piqued, I suppose, was about 3.5, 4 years ago. I was in Dubai, and if anybody knows that building, it's Atlantis out of the Palm. And below it, there's a restaurant, and there's loads of restaurants, but there's one in particular, and myself and a buddy of mine, Sean Moore, we went in for a steak one evening while we were working with some local banks doing some work, and that led me to think food and blockchain, and I'll show you why. This is what the menu said. You can see there it was the Seafire restaurant, and it said it was a tenderloin fillet of Johnstone beef, and it did say at the top of the page that it was Irish beef. And I got thinking about this. Well, how do I know? How do I know at the back of the kitchen, or that that this is Irish beef? Who do I know, or how do I know who John Stone is, and what does that actually mean to me? And how can I be sure that this is what it says it is? Now, if you look at the price of the steaks there as well, 250 grams for 367 dirhams. That's about 92 euros, or 120 euros for the 350 gram. Kind of got thing you'd want to be fairly sure about, where your steak is coming from and who it is. So I asked the way, are you sure this is Irish beef? And I asked, where in Ireland is it from? He probably thought it was a bit of a dope, probably one of those people at an annoying table. But I asked the question because I was just naturally intrigued about our beef supply and how it was making its way to Dubai. So at the same time, I Googled it, and this produced a nice fancy website for Johnstone beef, which, believe it or not, is part of Keypack. So I knew straight away it was from somewhere around Keypack and mainly Clonee. But I also got thinking, right, let's look at the Johnstone's side, and I went and digged a little further. And it's from Ballymahon in County Longford. So this steak that I was eating was from somewhere in Longford in the Midlands of Ireland. The way it came back and to, I suppose, itch my intrigue, he told me that the steak was from Speyside. Now he obviously knew his whiskies, and he knew that Speyside is a big whiskey producing region. He clearly didn't have as good a geographic grasp of Irish counties. But it really set me thinking, well, if the waiter's telling me it's from Speyside, which is in Scotland, and the menu's telling me it's from beef in Ireland, how can I really be sure? So when I came back to Ireland, I got writing a paper, and that paper focused on the beef industry and how can we prove the provenance of Irish beef on blockchain. So at that time, we kind of came out with kind of key themes or key capabilities the blockchain could do in terms of helping the beef industry. So the first one was, right, you can have supply chain traceability. So that's great, okay, right? We can track from left to right in the process. We can see where the beef is coming from, where it's going to, etc. That's great, but there's one big challenge in the beef industry: bad actors. How do we know that? Horse meat scandal. Okay, we won't say much more than that. So the reality is, so could I trust that? Okay, maybe, maybe not. I also thought about immutable data and audit trail. So again, that's really useful, but again, the data quality is only as good as the data that's put into it. And it's funny, if you read the new book, Supply Chain Revolution, that's been forwarded by Don Tapscott, there's a guy in that book called Mitchell Weinberg, and he talks in particularly about this challenge. And he phrases the term, the problem is the data, and it's only as reliable as the person providing the data in the supply chain. And he talks about bad actors or unreliable data providers. And that, again, is really the key. So how can you prove that that data is of good quality within the supply chain? The other part is then, the benefit of food safety and provenance. Obviously, if we think about the melamine scandal in powdered baby milk in China about 10 years ago, there was about 56,000 deaths from that. And again, Chinese consumers in particular really look for food safety. We're probably a little luckier here in this part of the world because we typically know where our food has come from, or at least we can be sure that it's come from not too far on the island, particularly in terms of our dairy and beef industry. But when you're living in an international market where you probably don't have that same level of provenance, this becomes a key challenge, and obviously food safety then, but also the proactive safety element as well. So can we act on data that we've received in a supply chain at a point in time to prove that actually we need to pull this immediately from the supply chain because we know that there is a relevant risk? The fair share of value, again, is an interesting one. So if you look at coffee in Kenya, the farmers receive about 30 cents for a kilogram of coffee. It's sold for about 100 times that at market. So how can we help to distribute the value and that share of value across the participants, particularly those who do the most work? That's the same for coffee, it's the same for beef, and it's the same right across different supply chains. The next piece then is the consumer engagement. So actually blockchain has the great ability to start engaging consumers, particularly when you add things like QR codes and you can start showing the data, the certs, etc. And also then differentiation. So, does this help differentiate a country or a product line or a product category? And I thought about all of this and I thought, well, yeah, it's interesting, but what's that going to look like in reality? And I suppose my view of the world, which was fairly utopian looking at this, and it's amazing and it's fantastic, that really was brought into sharp focus when I went to one of the biggest suppliers in this country to work on their supply chain and looking at applying blockchain to that. I won't name the supplier, but they're a very big brand. And the client engagement, as I say, it led me to this real world reality, or this absolute check on my own reality. Because in their world, how are you going to actually get down to the individual carton? Everything is done in batch, so one, it's going to be very difficult in so many instances to go below batch level. The second piece is actually the economic value. How are you going to capture value or change the supply chain without adding cost, huge cost to supply chains? And in particular, these companies who are manufacturing goods, they have spent so much money in terms of robots, in terms of supply lines, in terms of actual factory lines and processing. Do they want you going in, even changing their labeling? Because that has an economic effect. 2, 3 cents, even 20 cents for a label for a fast-moving consumer good. That's just going to completely put you out of the marketplace in terms of your end cost to the customer and your ability to compete. And the next piece then was the existing ERP investment that they have. These companies have just spent huge amounts of money developing systems, implementing them, fine-tuning them over the years, upgrading them. So again, how are you going to be able to play in that real-world scenario with all of these capabilities? And I suppose what it looked like in reality for me was you'd have to have some sort of system whereby you're connecting your blockchain environment with your kind of key layer for processing, and then linking that out then to your actual enterprise systems. So here's just a quick an overview. this is EY Ops Chain, and this is the capability we've developed. And I don't want to go into a sales pitch here, but what we've really looked at is, how would you connect ERP systems with the blockchain, looking at what's kept on chain, what's kept off chain, and then using core infrastructure in the middle to be able to really integrate. And in particular, Oracle management. And the management of data is becoming a key issue at the moment. If anybody's watching coin prices, you'll notice, particularly in the DeFi space, the price, for example, of Chainlink has gone through the roof. Why? Because people are starting to realize the value of oracles of data, where data is coming from, and trying to develop a clear view of that. But what it's done internally for us is lead to our position in the firm, which is led by Paul Brody, our EY blockchain lead. And he says the blockchain will do for networks of enterprises and business ecosystems what enterprise resource planning ERP systems did for the single company. And I think it's really worth bearing that in mind and really thinking about that in terms of what role blockchain will play. But the bigger question for me through these projects was, well, who's going to pay for this? And then who's going to demand it? Because it's great having this technology, it's great having this capability, but who's actually going to pay for it? And if anybody was reading this month's Harvard Business Review, there's a really good article in there about global supply chains in a post-pandemic world. It's by one of their professors, Willie Shee. And he says that consumers will continue to want low prices, and firms won't be able to charge more just because they manufacture it in a higher cost home market, even though loyalty is coming in. Why? Because competition will ensure that. You're still going to have to use your capital and your manufacturing capacity as frugally as you can. And that drive for frugality is going to be constant and unrelenting. So I think it's really worth bearing in mind that, yes, blockchain has this great capability, but again, who's going to pay for it and who's going to demand it? So that's kind of one angle I wanted to talk about. But then if we change tact, right? Well, actually, what I also noticed was that blockchain on its own isn't going to solve the problem itself anyway. And why is that? Well, because you really need three things. You need an assurance partner. Back to that whole data piece I talked about earlier, right? And that challenge of, unreliable data. Who is assuring the data? And then how are you going to link that then ultimately to your labeling? Because the consumer wants to see where things are coming from and how they are. Secondly, you're going to have that platform interoperability. Back to the previous slide, ERP systems have been developed, core capabilities have been developed. No COO is going to throw that capability away. He's going to want to retain it, keep it, and he's going to, or she, they're going to have to really be able to justify their investments. So really what it comes down to then is ultimately changing behaviors. And is that change and behavior going to be purely on the customer? No, it can't be. So really it's going to come down to ESG, right? So if we think about the environmental, the social, and the governance kind of angles that companies are really buying into at the moment, that is probably where this becomes most real. It's at the board table and it's with the investors of those companies. And what we're really seeing there is that they're going to have to embed ESG, which today has kind of remained on the kind of the outside of firms. They have these sustainability statements. Why? More so than anything, just to have them, to try and show some level of commitment. But what that really needs to do is get embedded into the strategy and the operation of the organization so that it becomes embedded in their behaviors. And it was funny, when Paul Polman took over as the CEO of Unilever, he ended quarterly earnings reports. And he said, I'm not doing this anymore. The reason I'm not going to do it is I want to focus on long-term sustainability and strategic enablement of my business. And that is that type of changing behavior that we need. Now, interestingly, when you put these three together, we start looking at the world of what we call asset chains and asset state. And this is what has been termed in that book, as I say, the blockchain revolution or chain revolution. It really is going to be about state. So not just where an article is in the supply chain or what its provenance was, but actually what was its condition at a point in time. We're particularly seeing that at the moment in relation to some of the cell and gene therapies that are being developed in the world. What is the specific state of things at a point in time? Because if you're going to insert DNA into somebody or somebody else's DNA into somebody, you really need to know the state of that before it goes in and its condition. So Don Tapscott in that book, he refers to this and he says, a state machine allows enterprises to know not only the state of the supplier, but also about the state of the assets themselves. This goes beyond the chain of custody idea. State machines provide visibility into things like trustworthiness of suppliers and the assets themselves. So you start building up that portfolio or that, I suppose, repository of trust not just in the asset, but in the surrounding hinterland or environment or ecosystem around that asset as well. So I really like that idea and that concept. But again, do consumers care enough to push this to their retailers to demand it? Again, I go back to the point that this is really going to be from investors and stakeholders and shareholders. And what was interesting during the pandemic, at the start of the pandemic, when the outbreak happened, and when performance of companies kind of dipped as there were asset sell-offs, green funds actually outperformed their benchmarks, which was really interesting. Why? Because it was a broader reflection of good management practices, and people were starting to buy into this concept that actually these companies are more sustainable long-term because their strategic priorities is right, as opposed to just profiteering. So I think that's really interesting. But again, the consumer's going to demand it. Well, maybe, maybe not. So that's why I pulled the next view together, which is, well, what do the consumers think at the moment? So this is an EY Future Consumer Index. We developed this on a quarterly basis. And we developed this view based on polling consumers right across the globe to a very high degree of accuracy in many instances. This is what we saw and current changes. So these are the current changes happening in the marketplace reflective at the moment. And this research is only a couple of weeks old. So what are they doing, or what are they changing? They're visiting physical stores less. Well, that's kind of obvious because of social distancing. But if you look, they're cooking more meals. So suppose pre-bought, pre-packaged, now starting to cook wholesome foods. That's obviously going to have an impact downstream in terms of what's going to be done from a consumer perspective in terms of, buying whole product and fresh produce as opposed to frozen, etc. What we're also seeing is that they are taking better care of their homes. They're connecting with more family in a very different way. What they're also doing is they're switching brands to support the local economy and business. 13% of them. Now, I would say that is hugely polarized between people who unfortunately have been furloughed, but opposed to those who've kept their jobs and are probably saving huge amounts of cash at the moment. But it is interesting that we're starting to see that. And I would definitely say that there is a level of nationalism that was created during COVID that we probably haven't seen for a while, which has gone to change kind of the globalization piece. What's interesting, though, is when we look ahead to what consumers will value in 5 years' time, the blockchain promise really is around transparency. Only 11% of consumers are really placing that up front and center. What they're saying is we want quality and health. So prove the quality of the produce and prove its health benefits. Now, what was even more interesting is that when we dig down into the figures, that was the global view. In China, health rose to 56% and affordability lowered to 17%. So Chinese consumer really cared about the health benefits. In China, they often talk about kind of you are what you eat, and your health benefits of what you eat become really good. Whereas affordability lowered to 17%. In the UK, affordability rises to 42%, and in the US, affordability rises to 45%. This is really interesting. Why? Because these are our key trading partners. We produce our beef, our dairy products. About 60% of those go to the US and to the UK. So very, very big impact and very interesting statistics. In the UK, transparency reduced to 8%, while in the US, you can see convenience rising to 29%. So it looks from those figures that maybe the Chinese consumers is a little bit more discerning than the UK and the US. But again, they have bigger issues by the looks of it, and particularly in relation to affordability. So then the question comes, well, will market factors change developments that actually will drive this requirement for enhanced capability in the supply chain? So from that perspective, I looked at it from another angle, and I looked at, well, what developments are going to come in terms of how we produce food and how we purchase food, because that should then be kind of an indicator or a guideline. So these are just some of the capabilities that are going to come out. It's a really good, interesting article. It's called 11 Crazy Ways Food Production and Eating is Set to Change in the Future. It was produced and developed, believe it or not, by Red Bull. But they talk about robot chefs, 3D printing, dinner, subconscious menus, where they'll literally retina track, drone delivery. I know we have a company now doing that in this country in Ireland. The company's name is Mana, which I think is just a great name. Believe it or not, down in Obama Plaza in County Offaly, they are drone delivering Supermax, which is just fantastic. DNA dictated diet, so literally looking at someone's DNA structure to identify the foods that work best for them. So really getting into the science of food. Insects is going to become big, and we're starting to see insect farms then pop up, even in our own country. And three others then: microfood, precision agriculture, vertical and urban farms, and then robot farmers. What I really want to talk about were just interactive grocery shopping and expired food scanners. Interactive grocery shopping, that picture there is taken from a subway station in Seoul in Korea. And literally it's a picture of foods, and you go up with your phone, you'll scan the picture, so a bottle of water or a banana. And from there, then you will be able to pick the brand and the choice of that kind of generic food. So you'll click on the water and it might give you Ballygown or Perrier or whatever it is. So that again is that where that differentiation is going to come. How are you going to differentiate a point of sale? And this is where the evidence, the capability, the proven quality is going to really tie in. The other piece that's coming is these expired food scanners. This is a picture of tomatoes being inspected by a laser, which was developed by the Fraunhofer Institute. I can guarantee that within the next 10 to 20 years, there'll probably be something similar, using the back of your phone to scan food to determine its nutrient value and its level of freshness. So the key question is, when we go into these new areas, how are we actually going to differentiate, but how are we also going to prove? If I'm, for example, living in Singapore and an urban farm is generating lettuce, which they're doing today on the tops of the car parks there, how do I know that they're not lying to me in terms of the retailer? How do I know that that hasn't come from Malaysia or Thailand or Indonesia? I really then do want to start having that provenance. So that's where it is going to start coming into its own. So we can see then that we need to drive greater differentiation through trust and transparency. And this is going to be critical, and in particular for Ireland. So then the question comes, well, where's the sweet spot? And it appears to cross the chasm, we need to find a sweet spot for blockchain in this food supply chain. And I think there's three, okay? The first one is luxury products and luxury markets. The second, I think, is brand value and protection, where we're looking to protect our value and really protect the brand. And then finally, I think it's specialized products and specialized markets. If we look at luxury products and markets, if anybody is into their whiskies, there's a new product on the market called Waterford. Waterford whiskey is produced in the Waterford distillery, but they've actually applied what they're calling the Terra Era code. So it's like a terroir, but it's a code on the back of the bottle. You can go in, and the provenance experience that they're developing is going to include some actual physical attributes, and also they're going to include even the sound from the farm. Now, they have gone down to a very low level of granularity in terms of proving their provenance. They literally only take barley, malting barley from certain fields. They prove those fields. They have the farmers on their website. And it's really, really interesting technology that they're using behind that. Not sure if it's blockchain, but these guys were the guys from the Blackwater Gin Company who did use blockchain previously, so I'm assuming it is. They haven't released the details of it. If I can find them out, though, I'll share them. The second is brand protection and value. And this is where we really need to do this. In terms of our exports, 3.5 billion of exports from January to June this year were our beef and our dairy sector. So it's hugely important that we protect it. In terms of brand value and protection, probably the best insight I had into this was a large drinks company, global name. People would know them, they probably drank their products. But in Kenya, 70% of all their products are false or fake within that marketplace. They're manufactured typically in places like Scotland. The vodkas are typically made in places like France and Russia. But what happens is that fakes and counterfeits are made in countries like Rwanda, Uganda. They're brought into Kenya. And not only is the company losing market share, it's also getting a bad reputation, and people are avoiding their products on the basis that because they don't have the certainty of is this a legitimate product, people, particularly with alcohols, they can, due to ethanol, they can go blind. The other downside risk here is also the revenue. The revenue commissioners, or the equivalent of revenue commissioners in Kenya, are losing hundreds of millions of dollars every year because the legitimate products which would be brought in and would be obviously run through the proper customs and excise duties and process, that's not happening with this counterfeit. So it's affecting the country in a big way. The third then, I think, is really around the specialized product and specialized market. And this is just one of the projects we've done within EY. So this is Lamura Wines from Sicily. They have focused on a fully organic supply chain. And what we do is effectively we prove that for them through certification, protection against counterfeiting. Counterfeiting is obviously a big concern down in Sicily, with the different crime gangs that work in that region. So how do we do it? Or what do we do? So this isn't the actual steps for Lemura, but more broadly, this is kind of how we take information. So we're taking data from different devices. So for example, in the first step, we're taking it from a drone or an IoT device. We're linking that then, and we're putting it to the blockchain, we're geotagging. The next step then, cultivation, we're adding inspections, lab analysis to confirm the quality standards, we're adding that. So again, this idea of a broader data set, not just, taking data from a farmer, for example, we're actually getting the backups on the data. Where's the assurance coming from? How do we know that the real nutrients, etc., are in it? Tagging then, creation using tokens, putting all the information together within the token and collecting those tokens to be able to prove the end-to-end, tag reading, and then packaging. And then being able to bring that right down then to the consumer. You can see it with QR codes, and then right down to Etherscan. So you can literally see the transactions on the Ethereum blockchain within that. So this probably isn't news to anyone, but that's kind of what we're doing in terms of, or the high-level graphic probably isn't news to anyone, but that's kind of the work that we're doing. So as a nation, is this an opportunity, right? So if we were to take this and we were to say, right, blockchain, food chain, yes, we have a burning platform here in terms of our beef and dairy industry and all the other aquaculture as well. Is this an opportunity? And if we were to look at holistically, I suppose, first off, we'd have to agree our strategy and we'd have to change our behaviors and practices. So if we were to look at, Michael Porter and his competitive advantage, you'd probably say, right, well, then let's differentiate, okay? And actually, there is great capability in this country to differentiate. If we looked at kind of our levers and our leverage points, the first one is the assurance program, Origin Green. Origin Green was the first such assurance program in the world in terms of the food and dairy sector. Why wouldn't we leverage that? Why wouldn't we take it to a new level? That just seems to be a no-brainer to me. The second capability that we have that our big competitors, particularly in the beef industry, don't have in either New Zealand or Australia or Brazil or Argentina is a genomic database. Every animal in Ireland is within our genomic database. We know everything about animals, where they've come from, where they're going, all those different pieces. We have a grass and pasture-based system, which we know is highly sustainable. And finally, we have sustainable farm-dome production. We don't have big industry farming here. So we have a real advantage that if you think about it, the real consumers who wanted that level of capability were the Chinese, not the Americans and the US, at least looking out. So the question is our strategy right as a nation at the moment? Should we be focusing elsewhere? So it's an interesting question. The other thing I would say about this is that all of the blockchain companies and all of the blockchain articles that you read when they talk about agriculture, they all talk about farm to fork, okay? In reality, because of the capabilities that we have, we can go a whole lot deeper. We can go from conception to consumption. And that's hugely different. Conception of an animal, being able to get the right breeding into an animal, being able to change the efficiency of the herd, basing that on consumption. You could literally be tracking types of data from consumers, from customers, to identify patterns of where and what type of food they like, right through to the consumption to match that in the breeding. So kind of very, very interesting capability that you could add there. So I think we need to differentiate. We also need to bear in mind that our competitors are acting. If we look at the APAC Provenance Council and what they've set up in terms of capability recently, and I'm often in contact with David and Darius, who runs that, we really need to keep an eye on that as a nation in terms of what's being done out there. Where they've been very clever in that is the blockchain provider themselves is connected to a labeling company. The labeling company and the blockchain provider have very good links with a global assurance company. They've then connected the platform to Alibaba, and they're doing financing through MasterCard. They've really thought about the whole ecosystem of the solution around it, as opposed to just a one-to-one. So for us, should we be differentiating? Should we be doing this? Well, I'll leave people with this thought before we open up to questions, but it's this. Let's just remember that any upside that we think is in this, in terms of differentiating and charging people more, that will be short-lived. Because what typically happens and what invariably happens is that new capabilities become the expectation and norm over time. If we think about Wi-Fi in hotels 20 years, it would have been a real nice to have. People would have been wowed. Now, it's a given, right? So our approach needs to focus on tackling the downside risk. And that downside risk is if we don't have this capability in place, we will lose market access in some of those key differentiated markets because they will expect this level of provenance, they will expect this level of transparency. So what do we need to do? We need to ensure through technology, those changing behaviors, that our exports are both transparent and frictionless. We have to make it as easy as we can to get our products onto Chinese shelves, onto Singaporean shelves, onto US shelves, UK shelves. And that's exactly what the APAC Provenance Council are doing at the moment. They are effectively looking to create a green lane between Australia and between New Zealand to get into places like China. And if we don't compete with that, we're going nowhere. So I suppose to conclude, blockchain is the great enabler. We know that, but there's so much more to it. There's the economic practical reality. There's the changing consumer behavior. There's the segmentation and the differentiation. And unless we change all of that and have that widespread change, we just won't achieve it. So I will open it to any questions. Hopefully that made sense. It wasn't just waffling. So I will stop the presentation there. I'll turn back on my video. So hopefully we can have a good conversation. So any thoughts, questions?
Yeah, if anybody wants to throw out a question, you're welcome to turn your mic and or camera on and ask away. Although I've warned everybody that y'all are at the end of 1.5 very long days, so level of brain function might not be as high as it normally is.
No problem.
But you know what, maybe I'll jump in with a couple of questions.
Yeah,
Cillian,
sure.
Nice presentation. It's Kieran Shoiga. I'm with Science Foundation Ireland.
Hi, Kieran.
And some of the researchers I get to talk to lately, they're starting to move away from that concept of initially a farm to fork, and there's a tongue-in-cheek version they use, which is from soil to sewer.
Yeah, that's right. So that's Donna Barry and the guys down in Chagas. Yeah,
you know Donna. Yeah,
I do. Yeah,
so he's told me I need to move on, by the way, and it's now from grass to gut. He says is a better approach. But I suppose that's one of the things in terms of your presentation there. You know, there's an awful lot of stuff moving on the whole time from a research perspective. It doesn't matter if it's, you know, the gut research, it doesn't matter if it's the genomics, which you're absolutely right. We have an incredible database. It can be, you know, the quantum computing and the threat it might pose to blockchain. So I suppose that would be maybe the one question just to get you to think about a little bit. So, you know, that novelty, you know, what is it that's coming next in your views? You know, I know you've looked out there with 5 years with consumers, but have you looked a little further and think, you know,
in terms of the technology itself?
Yeah. And the threats, you know, the threats to it and how it might respond to those.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think the biggest threat is our lack of joined up thinking. I think where nations will succeed won't be in technology specifically, because technologies will just become commoditized. It's actually going to be in their approach and their adoption and how they're able to, I suppose, change and rapidly iterate their capability to be novel at any point in time. So I think we do a great job in Ireland in terms of looking at new capabilities, talking about new capabilities. Do we always implement them holistically? Maybe, maybe not, I would say. And I think that's going to be one of the things, actually. How do we prove what we're doing? And I think that's going to be a challenge. I think the other big change that's going to come down is that whole idea of personalization. What is personalization going to look for, and how are we going to be able to serve that at mass scale? I think that's going to be a really interesting challenge. And the other one for me is just going to be, will the sustainability argument actually take people away from eating some of our key products? We've started to see that already. I mean, we see the advertisements up around what we did when we were all out and about before COVID came around. You know, the vegan movement. You know, we've seen the huge growth in coconut milk, oat milk, soya, all those different products that actually, because of consumer behaviors, gut behavior, and their kind of drive for proteins in their diet, will that change? So I think it's all those factors. I wouldn't tie it to any one. I think the biggest game changer is going to be AI. You know, the power that has to do in data mining, developing insights. That is the big one for me. Quantum computing. Would I focus on, if I had quantum computing capability at my fingertips, I probably wouldn't focus it at a blockchain, proving provenance of Irish beef. I'd probably be attacking the banks or something like that, right?
That's a whole other threat that's coming down the road. Yeah.
So I'd probably focus more on where the real money is. But it's all of those, Kieran. Yeah, it's all of those. There's probably no one single answer. And I think, to go back to the blockchain piece, the power of the blockchain is only going to be when it actually converges with those other technologies. It's those technologies working in unison that are going to create the real value. It's going to be not one on its own. And we're seeing that, as I say, with IoT and with AI already. You can start seeing it. And it's funny, a lot of our customers at the moment within EY, particularly in the life sciences space, what they're talking about is control towers. How do we use blockchain as an umbrella layer so it actually can sit over all existing technology and all existing kit to give us a control tower with the data and analytics, so we can standardize and normalize data, and from that then get the insights we need to be able to say, right, we need to make a change over here, or we see a problem coming downstream because of what the data is telling us. So we're starting to see that as a bit of a trend emerging. Yeah. I'll stop there. I'm conscious.
Well, do you know what?
There's so
One
much in my
very
head.
last thought to get from you then. As a
Yeah.
nation, because you talked about our national strategy, would you think of us more as fast followers or first movers?
Fast followers, we're definitely not first movers, in my opinion.
I'd be inclined to agree. Yep.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
I think, Kieran, that there is an opportunity here. I think the other piece around it is organizations, particularly in the private sector. We have done an incredible job of attracting companies like Google, Facebook to this country. If we want to get into the next wave, which is really about that digital transformation, digital revolution, we are going to attract companies not just through our corporation tax, because that's probably going to go away, right? Because the French look like they're trying to take that office all the time. So what's our advantage going to be? Our advantage is going to have to be that we eat our own cooking. So if we're going to try and encourage people to come to this country on the basis of that we're digitally revolutionary, we are at least digitally transformative, we're going to have to embed that as the fabric within the nation. So I think we're going to have to do it just to prove ourselves. So I think it's yeah. So I think we need to move from fast followers to
first movers,
vanguards, absolute vanguards.
You have to do it quickly because Sophie's giggling maniacally over here at the thought of the French taking over. So
that's what I was going to say. That's what we do.
Well, they're not taking over. I think they're just pushing the European Union and the European Commission to cripple us on our tax. But hey, that is most definitely our USP at the moment.
I have a question from Kevin. First of all, Cillian, great presentation. He says, could you expand a little on the Etherscan technology mentioned in one of your slides? Specifically, why use a public blockchain rather than a private permissioned approach?
Yeah, so our view within EY is that we would try to move everything to full public blockchains. If you are using a private blockchain, you're just effectively creating a network among yourselves. And we just don't see as much value in that. We see that organizations like it as I would say, an intermediary step. They're using it to kind of get them into a blockchain world, get them thinking about blockchain. And then ultimately, we would be pushing them to move. In terms of Etherscan, that's just an open technology that's available out there. You can go in, anybody can use it. Yeah, I can point you to Etherscan. I don't know the guts and the bells of it, to be honest. I'm not a technologist. So yeah, but I can get you some capability.
Cool. David, you have a question? Oops. David, you have a question? Go for it.
Sure. Hi, Cillian.
Hi, David.
From the discussion we've had today, one of the questions we were looking at, and we're not really sure again, because we're not really too au fait with blockchain before this hackathon, was in the example you showed where there's this diagram and you're helping prove the provenance of produce, at these different steps.
Yeah.
You find that a high proportion of supply chains would have even the basic data end to end of, say, traceability, and is that something that might differ between, like, say,
typically,
a cheese in Ireland being consumed in Ireland versus a banana in Fiji getting to my house? Like,
the rule, David, that would be available today is that usually you'll have one step back and one step forward within a supply chain, so people will know where it's come from and then where it's going. Very little beyond that. Some of the retailers do take it very seriously. So, for example, when they're coming to buy, let's just say that they're looking to buy 100,000 tons of Irish beef, they'll come to the likes of a Keypack or an ABP, and they will literally say, "We want to meet your farm." Well, now the other insight that I have had from one of the big producers here, not on the beef side, on the dairy side, is that two of the retailers in the UK now, and I can't remember which names they were, they are actively asking now about not only the sustainability of the produce, but also the economic viability of the community that it has come from. So with that, they are looking for deeper insight from further into the supply chain. But it's typically one back, one forward would be kind of a rule.
Okay.
It
Yeah,
also depends on the type of organization, David. It's like the most sophisticated will be big ERP systems. You know, some of them will even have, you know, some level of tracking and tracing built themselves. They might even use companies. So, for example, like IdentiGen, which was recently sold here in this country, they might use someone like that in terms of looking at the capability that they have, and they'll, you know, go and look at DNA structures and stuff like that. But it's literally the variances from that really sophisticated system right down to Excel, you know, and everything in between.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, does anybody else want to ask a question while we're
Or even any thoughts or comments? I mean,
or
just
comment? Matthew, do you want to share your comment that you've dropped in the chat here? You can.
Good to see Matthew. I haven't spoken to Matthew for quite a while. We met a good few times years
We were
ago. How are you,
just
Matthew?
talking earlier. I feel like the bringer together of lost friends this weekend.
It is good to see you, mate.
Yeah, hi. How you doing, Cillian? I think I remember maybe the last time I don't know if it was the last time, but you were trying to convince Andreas Antonopoulos to join the board of Deloitte for blockchain or something to that effect. I don't know if you remember that day I think it was in Milan.
Was that
an event?
In Milan? Yes, we were at the Future. I remember the event. Yeah, it was a good event actually.
Yeah.
I remember the good Prosecco afterwards as well.
We did enjoy quite a few of those, yeah. No, but no, I was just saying, just in response to the question that was raised by one of the questions was about quantum computing, and would that be a threat? And just what I put in the comment box was just, I mean, that is not a blockchain question. That's and I think Cillian mentioned it as well. It's you know, it's why would you go for blockchain technologies that as soon as you compromise them, all the value is lost anyway? And so I quite often use that phrase, you know, when quantum computing is available and people can use it for nefarious purposes, everything else in the world that's digital will get eaten for breakfast, and blockchain will get eaten as an afternoon snack. So I don't think it's a more general thing, but that's also assuming that cryptographic techniques that are inherent to blockchain technologies and other data storage mechanisms, that we wouldn't evolve on that side, and that's obviously not the case. So there's already NIST guidance out about which hashing algorithms, for example, are quantum resistant versus which are quantum proof. So yeah, I think the technology, blockchain technology, is evolving. Although we've been in, you know, it's been around for 10 years. It's so rapidly evolving, and the techniques that are being used to secure information on chain is evolving at light speed. So yeah, that was essentially what I had to say on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Any other questions, comments, thoughts on the world? Perfect. Well, we'll wrap it up then. We'll let all the participants get back to work if they want to continue working. So for everybody who's in the chat, and I'll drop this into the Discord as well. So this is our last scheduled thing for today. You're welcome to continue working.
Robert's dog. Should we do that now? What is on the chat?
Before
they leave,
we're gonna do one more thing.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm introducing it because I added somebody last minute in the schedule. So we have this weekend some members of the Paris Blockchain Week, and there's somebody that is in the chat that is working on the Horizon projects. I think you hear Robert. I can see. I am.
Yeah. By the way, guys, if you're too tired and
no. It's not that at all. It's not that at all.
So.
It's not that at all. It's just that I'm putting people together, but I'm not organizing things. So I was just like, Caitlin, please, can you introduce that person last minute? But you can. I give you the mic. I need to make you co-host if you need to share your screen. Give me a second.
No screen share. I've just got some talking points, and I'll keep it real quick.
Oh, okay. Well, you can go ahead.
No worries. Okay, guys, and please, if this is too last minute, no worries. I enjoyed just attending. It was really good speaker session, so that was pretty cool.
No, you're totally fine. And even though we're sitting right here next to each other.
Right.
I missed the communication somewhere.
No worries at all. So guys, I'm Rob Viglione. If there are any real Italians on this call, I know the way I pronounce my last name is butchering it for the Italian ear. My family's Italian-American. I think the token American on this call, I'm not sure. I'm the co-founder of Horizon. It's a public blockchain ecosystem, and also the CEO of Horizon Labs, which is a software development company that builds blockchain for a variety of different clients. So I'm, let's see, I also, or I guess our company also has an EU company or subsidiary based out of Milan, Italy. So I do share the European business focus on at least our subsidiaries' activities. I'm a scientist by trade, a physicist, mathematician, finance PhD. So I do span the hard science and the social science, but I'm definitely a developer sympathizer. So our entire organization is built around developers. We're completely developer focused. So I definitely share your pain, and when I try to code, I really share your pain, but I should never be coding anything, and we have much better engineers on our team. So my talk is really just meant to take a step back. I know you guys have been in the weeds today, and this last talk was just fantastic on thinking about the business applications for how this technology can be deployed in the real world. But before you even make a decision on where, what technology stack you want to build on, where you want to deploy it, there are a variety of options in the blockchain world, and you should really consider the different ecosystems. So before you make a decision on where you want to start building your technology, you really should take a look around. You don't just have to follow the herd. You don't just have to pick the first one you find. You can actually shop around and think about what blockchain ecosystem matters, because they do differentiate from each other. There are some that are absolutely enormous right now, like the Ethereum blockchain. And you just heard about Etherscan and putting together enterprise blockchain solutions with public blockchain interface, and that's absolutely fantastic. There are others out there, ours, obviously, the Horizon Public Blockchain. We're a newbie to this public blockchain world. We launched in 2017, but we launched and then we started doing our deep R&D, and we just went to market in July with a beta of our product, which is basically a blockchain platform that does two things. Our differentiator is really on trying to get better economics for sustainability. And importantly, where I said we're entirely developer focused, a big element of our public blockchain system is we built in endogenous rewards for developers, because we think it's absolutely critical that if you're going to have a sustainable ecosystem, you have to reward on the margin contribution. And one of the most important contributions into any ecosystem are the people that actually develop the software, develop the tools, and develop the businesses that make use of the ecosystem. So the first thing that we did differently was we actually built in a reward mechanism right away, so that whenever a developer launches their own blockchain, and our tech stack, our SDK, is all about making it easy to launch your own blockchain, you actually get rewarded by transaction revenues within the chain. The other big thing for us, our core tech is all about scaling privacy. And we think this is really important for the next generation of applications that are fighting the old Silicon Valley mindset of throwing the freemium platform out to the market and then harvesting the data that comes off of it. Because now over the last 10 years, data actually has value. It didn't have as much value 10, 15, 20 years ago, but the value of data is accelerating exponentially. So now I think users still don't care, but users are starting to have some sense that they ought to care, because the data they're generating at enormous magnitudes is starting to have real value. So our tools actually scale privacy. We are experts in something called zero knowledge cryptography, which is a subset of cryptography, but actually in its application to blockchain. There are a few of us out there that develop these types of tools, and we're in particular focusing on data privacy tools. And data privacy tools to scale because our SDK helps developers launch their own blockchains that are interoperable with the other elements of our blockchain ecosystem. So what Horizon is all about is a blockchain's ecosystem. We liken it to a hybrid public-private blockchain ecosystem or architecture. It's sort of analogous to you bringing internets into the public internet. We're all about the public blockchain side, but still give developers and businesses the tools so that they can develop their own private ecosystems, but they can still leverage the public system in a way that is still privacy preserving and doesn't transmit data back over to the public side if they don't want to. So there's a whole bunch there, and I'll give you some contact information at the end if you care about that tech stack. But this talk is more about you as developers or entrepreneurs really should think about which ecosystems you want to join and be a little bit rigorous in that thought. It's not like committing to a public ecosystem is indefinite. You're not getting married necessarily to the public blockchain that you choose, but there are switching costs for sure. If you're switching from one platform to another, that could bite you in the butt later on. So think about it in advance if you can. Let's see what I want to talk about other than like our tech stack. Really, the developer choices. Think about user fees, and not every blockchain is built the same as others. The Ethereum blockchain, I think, is an ecosystem that I very much look up to. And you just heard how Ernst Young is focusing on Etherscan and plugging data back into the Ethereum public chain. It's a fantastic ecosystem. They are by far the most mature when it comes to developer tools and businesses building on that infrastructure right now. But because of that, and because of architectural choices early on, costs are skyrocketing. So I think the numbers most recently are something like roughly $100 million per quarter in fees going into the ecosystem. So that means users are having to pay about $100 million per quarter year to use applications in that ecosystem. There's a huge decentralized finance application wave going on there that is just driving transaction usage and driving costs. So you as application developers or entrepreneurs need to think, so here's the trade-off. You can join a very mature, or by very mature, let's put that in parentheses because the entire industry is extremely new. We're still trying to figure out our value add, but you get a whole bunch of other developers and a whole bunch of tools. So you have an ecosystem there, and that's fantastic. But you're also grappling with the fact that your applications, transactions for your applications will necessarily have significantly higher fees than if you chose other options that are on the market. Think about your users and think about how the fees are going to scale with your application's usage. So you may be able to have low volume application usage on chain right now, but if you have significantly, if you're actually successful and you have a lot of transactions start going through your application, you could potentially, or you have to think about how the fees are going to scale in your system. Not all blockchains scale equally well. In fact, some are actually terrible at scaling. So you need to think about that. And think about also, this seems obvious, but it's not always obvious with entrepreneurs that just jump into the market in my industry. And you guys think, my perspective is I'm coming from the public blockchain world. And in my industry, there are too many entrepreneurs that you craft a clever little white paper and put up a clever little website and get tens of millions of dollars in token crowdfunded capital. Totally absurd, but it is an interesting new funding channel that's out there for entrepreneurs. But think about it. How are you going to derive revenue? Are you going to are you going to participate in this crowdfunding environment? And if not, will you use tools like, and just again, to throw it out there, what we do at Horizons, we integrate from the tech stack itself a revenue stream for developers. And you have to think about how you're going to monetize, you think about the cost structure, and then also the revenue structure of the chain that you choose to participate with. And then think about what kind of support you're going to get. So not every public blockchain cares that you build on it. Say in theory they do, but in practice, there's a lot of heterogeneity in the market. And if you work with a smaller team or a smaller chain, you could potentially have access directly to the core developers of that chain and work with them. And that could have big value versus if you're one of thousands on a larger chain, your needs on the margin are not going to impact the core technology. So just keep that in mind. If something that you need to do requires some technology, either changes on the tech stack for the chain, or if you run the risk of being potentially deplatformed because you build out a technology that later on you build an application on a tech stack that later on that tech stack changes because you have no influence in how it's governed, that could bite you in the butt as well. So you need to think through these things as entrepreneurs and developers. And then also think through financial incentives. Some chains offer you financial incentives to participate on them directly, and you ought to consider that. There are a variety out there, my competitors included. You really should look at them. So overall, you need to think about the architecture on top of what you're building, not just your application. And this matters. And again, going back to the whole deplatforming idea, it's not the same thing as being deplatformed from a Facebook because they choose to platform you, but it could be because of obsolescence, because that core technology, the developers who actually control that network, even though it's called decentralized, actually do have discretionary authority or discretionary power to change the core protocol. And they do this often. They were probably quarterly, if not more frequent, depending on the network, changes to the core technology. And you need to make sure that you either have some influence or understand that there's some stability in the core technology so that it doesn't change in a way that could be adverse to the application that you decide to build on it. So you need to think about that. Also taking into consideration the teams, the communities, from on the public side, that you choose to work with, because it does matter. Even if you're on the enterprise side and you're thinking about launching an application, it's a pure business play, and you don't really care about the public cryptocurrency and public blockchain world. That world could impact your business. So it is important to consider it. So anyway, if you guys are interested, I'll just throw out a plug for us with Horizen. It's horizen.io. Our ticker symbol, because we are in the cryptocurrency world, is Zen, Z-E-N. So it's Horizen, and it's horizen.io. And we do have significant developer tools and significant developer opportunities. If you want to participate, come check it out. We actually have a Horizen Early Adopter Program, which is HEAP.horizen, HORIZEN.io. And we also have bounties if you want to start participating in like actual real world open source contributions. So you can come and contribute to our GitHub repositories and be part of the developer community. So anyway, you guys can reach out to me directly if you have any questions, want to chat, learn a little bit more about what we're doing. Rob@horizen.io. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. You can drop the link in the chat.
Great, I'll do that.
Your website, you can do that now, and then we'll send it to the people that missed that on the Discord channel as well. You do have a question. Matthew is asking how many nodes are running in the Horizen network?
Yeah, right. That's a great point. Yeah, we have 40,000 nodes, which is kind of crazy because that's more than Bitcoin and Ethereum combined. And this goes because we changed the economics of our system to be more sustainable, and it was important to us to build out a large network infrastructure. So on the public side, and we don't know who these people are, it's a truly decentralized public blockchain, we have roughly 40,000 nodes running. So there are a variety of different ways of looking at what we do. One way of looking at what we do is we actually provide a public infrastructure, kind of like AWS, but a publicly owned version of AWS. And from a business perspective, you can think about participating in that is you get the economies of scale of participating in a public infrastructure. So on the margin, your costs for participation are quite low. Nicholas, Zendoo. Yeah, so Zendoo is, if you're a blockchain geek, Zendoo should be of interest to you. Zendoo is our new interoperability protocol for how we do what's called sidechains. In the blockchain world, a sidechain is a blockchain that is interoperable with, say, like a main public blockchain. Like Horizen has a main public blockchain, and the Zendoo protocol allows, it's an asymmetric peg between different blockchains. So you can take our developer SDK and launch your own blockchain that's interoperable with the main blockchain, and then ultimately interoperable with services in that ecosystem. And that's all made possible with the Zendoo protocol. Again, for the geeks out there, it's really cool because it's the first decentralized sidechain protocol. There are a bunch of other sidechain protocols in the blockchain world. There's Cosmos, there's Polkadot. There are others out there that try to do sidechains, and they do them, but they do them with varying degrees of centralization. And by that, I mean, like trusted certifiers or trusted parties need to participate in that to validate transactions. The Zendoo protocol allows complete decentralization and permissionless participation. So you can actually rely on something called the ZK snark for block validation, and not actually trusted certifiers. You rely on the cryptography and the math and not people. Anything else, guys? Oh yeah, the consensus mechanism. That's a great question. So the Horizen public blockchain has a proof of work consensus mechanism. It's modified Nakamoto consensus from Bitcoin because we actually layered in 51% resistance in there. We short-circuited the common attack vector for 51% attacks, which is probably a rabbit hole I I don't have to go down, but it's modified Bitcoin consensus proof of work on the main chain. The important thing here, and I think for sustainability is, so proof of work does a great job for security, but it's not very good for electrical usage or sustainability long-term. So what we're doing is all of our side chains are proof of stake, and we're pushing all of the application stuff to the proof of stake, blockchains, our side chains. So that over time, as our network, our blockchain and blockchains ecosystem is growing, we're not expanding the proof of work. Just only the main chain is proof of work, and that may change over time. But all of the application stuff and all of the growth is happening on a proof of stake. So if you look at like an average cost or average electrical cost of our ecosystem should be declining significantly because all of the application growth will be happening on proof of stake. And if anyone's curious, to go deeper into that, it's a Byzantine fault-tolerant modification to the Ouroboros-Krauss protocol. So with Horizon, it's like you're running a Cardano sidechain with our proof of work main chain for this hybrid security model. Yeah, so it's I think cool stuff too. Appreciate that. And yeah, and guys, really, if there are any questions, I typed in my email address here. Please reach out directly, rob@horizon.io. I'm happy to talk really about anything.
Awesome. I've dropped that into our giant Discord
Cool.
channel. So everybody has it now, even more than the 8 of us that are on here. So hopefully you'll get some questions from there. That's everything that we have for today. Now officially, actually, because I read my messages now. And so, yeah. So anyway, I know you guys are probably I'm seeing other people's messages up here that their brains are mush. Totally, I agree with you. Finish out your plan for what you want to get done. Well, what you have to get done tomorrow. We'll come back on at 11 to kick off. We'll talk a little bit about pitching. And then you have the entire rest of the day until 4:30, which I'm going to keep repeating at you, 4:30, when your pitches are due tomorrow. And we'll go over all of what you need to do, what you need to have for your pitch tomorrow, so that you have everything and you know when it's due and what is due. There's also an outline in your team folder toolkit of what I will be going over for your pitch if you want to get a little bit of a head start. That's everything we have. So if you want to work more tonight, you're more than welcome to, as always, or to work before we start tomorrow morning. And like I did last night, I'll keep my Discord open until about 9:30, and I'll open it again tomorrow around 9:30. So if you have any questions within that time, I will answer you quickly. And if you have questions outside of that time, I'll answer when I get up. That is it. Thank you, everybody, for your awesome work today. The mentors had great comments about your ideas, and we are looking forward to see what you have at the end of the day tomorrow. So do a bit of work, get a lot of sleep, stock up on coffee, and we look forward to seeing you all tomorrow at 11. So bye.